Hello, this is Danny Ryan, and welcome to the ThreeWill podcast. Today I have Brandon Holloway.
Thanks for having me, Danny.
You're welcome. I don't know why I want to start singing, but I'm going to start singing if that's okay.
Whatever
I'm going to
works
sing
for you.
all my questions for you will be sung.
Interesting.
So Brandon helps out with our QA, otherwise known as Quality Assurance. So he makes sure that everything's staying tip-top quality-wise on our projects. And so I have asked him to sit down and just tell me, what does it mean to do QA on a typical ThreeWill project? What does that mean to me? Let's get started off with this question. When do you typically get pulled in first for the project? And I'm just sort of talking about sort of generally for the typical project that you'd be a part of.
Right. I'll usually get pulled in a lot of times at the very beginning, even though it's going to be a few weeks before there's going to be any real testing, even if it's still in the requirements gathering or architecture phases. Sometimes, it's good for me to be there because I'm still thinking in the beginning on, how would a user approach this, which is the mindset I try to put myself into. So they try to involve me as early as possible that I could, provide some value. So,
and usually start off with taking a look at the product backlog and what the user stories are. Is that where your first sort of thing that you interact with on the project?
Right. The user stories and the product backlog. That's right. So a lot of times, a lot of what I focus on is the acceptance criteria, which is definitely not the only thing I look at for it. But like I said, I got to put myself in the user perspective and what does this story mean, to the typical user, and just figure out how to build test cases off of that. So, and a lot of times early in the sprints and early in the project, I can go ahead and start working on test cases based off of mainly the product backlog.
Okay.
Even before, well before testing is actually available to be done. So.
And then you would, as you find defects, you would log those defects to, where is there a typical place where we're putting those defects?
Right. On most projects, we use SharePoint to.
Ooh, SharePoint. Tell me more about this. What is this?
Yes, this thing we use around here called SharePoint. It's a pretty cool little application.
Sounds fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of times we just have an issues list. It's just a basic list in SharePoint that a lot of the developers will set up alerts for, so they know when they get an issue coming across, they can go straight in there and work on it.
And it just probably has like a status column as far as where
the
defect
the normal, the priority, what I think the priority should be, this what I think the severity should be, what type of issue it is, that kind of thing, and then I'll just assign it to whoever is assigned to that particular product backlog with that feature. That can vary though. Sometimes they'll pass it to somebody else that it may be a better fit to work on. But
and so when to retest because they're updating that issue log.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. There's a few different statuses that it'll go through. When I first open an issue, obviously it's an open status, and then when the developer fixes it, it'll go into coded status. So it's not available for me to test yet. They've just checked their code in.
Okay.
And whenever they get ready for another QA deployment, then they deploy it, and then it's in the QA environment ready to be tested. Then they'll move it to either deployed to QA or ready for QA. That there's a couple different statuses depending on the project.
So a lot of our projects will have a separate QA environment that you work within. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that normal?
Yeah, it's pretty normal. We've used a couple different a different cloud service one time to
jeez. Host failure. Just a second. Could be anybody. I'm sorry. I'm going to shut this off. And here we go. And you were saying, sir, yes.
And the best case is probably when the clients themselves have a QA environment set up that I can go in there and use.
Okay.
That's usually the best method, just because that's basically what they're gonna have their own UAT environment in that same environment, then onto production. I mean, everything should be similar. It should be more, along the lines of how it's going to be in the real world. Now we do have, I have a couple different virtual machines that I'll, host a QA site in.
Okay.
And, it depends on the project and if they have an actual QA environment for us to work on or not. So
gotcha.
Deal with what we got.
Yeah. So it depends on the project, really.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does it work with? Are you testing? Like within the sprint cycle, are you testing things that were implemented in the previous cycle, and then they're doing a defect resolution or giving some capacity towards defect resolution in certain sprints, or how does that all work?
In a perfect world.
Which tell me this imaginary place that you call the perfect world.
Excuse me. So say it's for instance, we'll say a 2-week sprint. And in a perfect world, I would write my test cases, maybe the first week or somewhere in that time frame, and maybe the beginning of the second week of that sprint, all of those product backlog items, those stories will be available for me to test.
Okay.
And I should be able to get those, at least a good round of testing in within a couple of days. So maybe by Wednesday of the second week or so, assuming the sprint ends on a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And then, whatever issues come out of that, they can be working those issues and get them back to me, and I can retest them. And so I can get everything closed out and everything marked as tested by the last day or the day before the last day of the sprint. That's a perfect world.
That's a perfect world. Okay.
It doesn't always happen like that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of factors, a lot of movement going on everywhere. People change priorities of stories, and the client's involved pretty heavily in Scrum. So
yeah.
So we just adapt with it, and I adapt just like everybody else does. And sometimes that means maybe a couple of product backlog items for a sprint may just be all the way pushed to the next sprint.
Okay.
Sometimes I may get them on the actual last day of the sprint. And so I at least get what testing done I can, like maybe a good smoke test of the functionality, or just do some ad hoc testing to hit the points that I think may be most prone to have issues.
Mm-hmm.
At least get as much done of a first round of testing as I can before the beginning of the next week rolls around. We have a sprint review. So, and from there, I'll clean up all the test cases and run the rest of the tests and everything. It may be into the very beginning of the next sprint, but that happens sometimes. So it's not a perfect world, but.
Mm-hmm. And the it sounds like a lot of the type of testing that you're doing is more like end user testing, sort of really trying to focus in on what the experience that the end user would have with.
Right. It's pretty much all manual testing,
okay.
And it's mainly use cases. And a lot of the reason for that is I guess balancing a couple different projects. We have to, whatever my capacity is on a particular project, I have to kind of base my testing scope around that capacity. So there's always more testing to be done. You can always, you could test forever on something and still not 100% cover everything. It's just the nature of it. So basically I build off of what my capacity is for this project, what we've decided on with the client for this project.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, out of that amount of hours, I'm going to get the most effective testing I can done out of that. And that's pretty much going to be manual use case testing. Not a lot of tools involved. It's more of a time sensitive thing, and we want to make sure we hit everything that we can from a user's perspective so that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're across multiple projects. Mm-hmm. You probably coming in, since we're building a lot of web-based stuff, probably have to get a list of which browsers are supported, that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, that's another big part of it. Sometimes there'll be a project where, we're Internet Explorer 10 only.
Okay.
And so that's the only browser I have to test in, but many times, they want to support it on Chrome. They want it IE 10 and up, which includes IE 11. And in some cases, I guess maybe Microsoft Edge will start coming in since it's a newer browser. And, sometimes, Firefox needs to be supported, so it just depends on the project. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times there is definitely cross-browser testing, and IE in particular tends to behave differently in some situations than say Chrome and Mozilla and Firefox. So yeah, IE is fun. So there's always that to deal with.
Why, are you crying? There's no need to cry. Did IE bring tears to your eye? Don't look like tears of joy either.
My eyes just watering.
So tell me a couple more questions, and I'll let you go. Okay. I'll let you leave. What do you find is the most challenging part of what you do?
Well, definitely one thing is that just the nature of being, Agile Scrum is that you don't get as concrete requirements to test on, which for testing is very important. It's important for everybody on the project, but like I base what I build in my test cases off of what is supposed to happen in these situations. So you don't have detailed requirements, very detailed requirements sometimes, in Scrum, at least in my experience. So that's one thing. There's a lot more interaction, between myself and developers. Yeah, I ask questions. That's how I like how everybody's so open here. It's just, it's just easy to get with somebody about something like that. But I'll need things clarified, and it sometimes takes a while for me to get the full picture of everything without these, hard requirements and everything. So, but that's mainly one of the challenges, and of course, just time in general. When things get pushed back, testing is at the end of everything. So, sometimes I find myself working late on a Friday, a little bit on the weekend, which, it's not a big deal. But that definitely can come into play, especially later in projects, depending on what needs to be put into the backlog at the last minute or taken out, or, so.
I think one of the, when we look at what makes a great QA person is they have to come in and take some initiative to come into it, because you're coming into a project and really trying to understand what are we trying to do for the client as well. And I think you do a great job at that. From what I'm hearing from other people, you've tested my website.
I'm about halfway done with it, so I got you a list of things.
So for people who come to ThreeWill.com, it's half tested. Okay? How does that make you feel? It's half tested.
Half tested.
Don't worry, I change things daily. I mean, I don't change the name of the company daily, but I do change a lot of stuff on the website daily just to keep things moving.
I didn't realize how much there was.
It's a dynamic site. It's so dynamic.
It's pretty large.
Easy. Well, maybe it's a softball, maybe it's not a softball question, but what do you love about what you do?
Oh man, I don't know. It's kind of like I'm a perfectionist in a way. It's like I hate to say I like it's kind of like a treasure hunt almost. It's like I'm trying to find, there's something in here that I'm going to find that's not doing what it's supposed to do. I just like finding things like that. Yeah. Not mistakes. That's a bad word for it. But I like finding bugs. I like finding, it's just like a hunt for me. It's since I first started testing, I didn't even know, coming out of college with my degree, I didn't even know there was like a, profession software tester or whatever. Yeah. And have a cousin that did that at a company back in Columbus, and I was like, man, this sounds like something right up my alley, and I started doing it, and I love it. I mean, it's just like you never know what you're going to come across, and working with great developers obviously helps a lot, because sometimes in the past, like other jobs, sometimes you don't have developers that are very willing to sometimes someone look at QA as that guy, my nemesis, and it's not like that here, and it's everybody's on the same team, and it's great.
Well, I heard within the past week, like Eric was talking about how much he appreciates what you do and how he feels better after you've tested something, and so it's wonderful having you around to do that, and you're an important part of each one of our projects. So, and I love it that you love to do treasure. It is treasure hunting, right? You're trying to go and figure out. It is, and
couldn't think of another way to put it.
It's a great analogy. It's a wonderful analogy, and it's you're trying to go in and figure out what are the important. When talking about treasure, what are the big things that might we might have overseen as a developer.
Right, and because a lot of times, I have to put myself into the client's into the end user's shoes. That's what I'm doing. I'm like, what would a user do here? What would does this look right to the user's perspective? And just given that whole side of things is, I like it.
We love having you here too, because we can really think through what from somebody from Alabama would do.
Here we go with this again.
Okay, for those, it's not an inside joke. He's from Phoenix City, Alabama. Yes, he's representing Alabama in the ThreeWill family. We now have like a southeast.
Not the school, Alabama.
It's not the school. Yeah, let's get that straight. I'm sorry, you're representing the state of Alabama.
We'll say that. Yeah.
The school of Auburn?
Auburn.
Oh, jeez, there's too many of you guys around here. Why don't you go hang out with your other Auburn friends and get the heck out of here? Okay, that's the end of this. That's the end of this episode. Let's get out of here. Yeah, I'm gonna kick the. Here's where I kick the microphone over and get out of here. Slam the door.
Well, y'all are the guys hiring the Auburn folks. That should tell you something.
I know. Oh, well. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up this episode. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Brandon, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Go get back to testing and go back for you've got a long ride home from here. You're going to head home a couple hours. Okay.
Back to Alabama.
Just test this like you were someone from Alabama.
Yeah.
Thank you for spending your time here, Brandon.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.